Today, 3 stories. A nurse who turned her manager's own rule into a $14,000 weapon. A maintenance supervisor whose personal spreadsheet brought down an entire factory operation after they showed him the door. And a cashier who did absolutely nothing in response to being publicly accused of theft. Nothing at all. And 3 years later, Karma did the most complete, most surgical job she could have ever imagined. Stay with us. Every single story pays off.
The clock-out rule.
My manager handed me the rule on a Tuesday morning. She thought it would keep me in line. She had no idea I was going to use that exact rule to build a case against her and hand the bill straight to HR.
My name is Sarah Nolan. I'm 38 years old. I'm a certified nursing technician, and I worked at Riverside Medical Center in Louisville, Kentucky, for 11 years. 11 years of never clocking in late. 11 years of covering sick colleagues without a single complaint. 11 years of knowing the name of every patient on my floor before I even picked up the clipboard. I was not looking for trouble. Trouble showed up in a blazer, carrying a brown folder, with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Her title was Regional Operations Manager. In practice, she was the person sent by corporate to optimize processes and units that weren't hitting their quarterly productivity targets. Her name was Bryce Langford, early 40s, MBA on the wall behind her. A handshake that was just a little too firm to be genuine. Bryce arrived at Riverside in September with 3 stated objectives: reduce overtime, standardize protocols, and her personal favorite phrase, create accountability at every level. Week 1, she observed. Week 2, she started holding meetings. Week 3, she showed up with the memo, 1 page, dense corporate language. But the core was simple, effective immediately. All clinical staff must obtain direct supervisor approval before clocking out at the end of each shift. Approval must be documented in writing or via the internal messaging system. Failure to comply will be considered insubordination. None of us believed we were reading it right. I read it 3 times. In the break room, the 6 of us from the afternoon shift just looked at each other for full seconds of silence. It was Renata who spoke first. She wants us to ask permission to go home. That's what it says, I told her. Is that even legal? Someone else asked. Nobody answered. Because none of us knew. And Bryce Langford was counting exactly on that. That night, sitting in my car in the Riverside parking lot before I turned the key, I stared at the copy of that memo in my hand. My first thought was ugly. I'm not gonna pretend it wasn't. My second thought was colder. Much colder. If she wants documented approval before I can leave, then I am going to document everything. I drove home. Slept well for the first time in weeks. Because I had just realized something. Bryce Langford hadn't given me a rule. She had given me a weapon. That same night, before bed, I opened my laptop. Not the hospital's system. My laptop. Bought with my money, in my house, on my network. I created a folder, called it simply, Approvals. Inside a blank document, date at the top, time shift name. The next day, I sent Bryce a message through the hospital's internal system exactly at the end of my shift. Bryce, my shift ends now. Requesting approval to clock out per the September 14th memo. Awaiting your response. Sarah Nolan, Wing C. She replied in 4 minutes, approved 2 words. I copied it, pasted it into my personal document. Date, time, saved. Second night, same thing. Third night, same. By the end of week 1, Bryce had responded every single time, fast, mechanical, not once realizing what was happening. Approved, approved, approved. Every single one, copied, pasted, dated, saved. But I wasn't just documenting the approvals. I was documenting everything. Because the memo said approval to clock out. It didn't say anything about what happened if approval was late. It didn't establish a response deadline. It didn't mention what staff should do while they waited. And I had a friend, she works in HR at a completely different company. Nothing official, just a conversation over coffee on a Saturday morning, and she told me something I didn't forget. If your shift is over, you're ready to leave, and you're waiting for approval that hasn't come. You're still at work. And if you're at work, you're working. I let that sit for a couple of days. Then, on a Thursday in early October, Bryce Langford didn't respond. It was 11 p.m., my shift had ended. I sent the standard message, 11:10, no response. 11:15, no response. 11:22, Bryce replied, approved. Sorry, I was in another meeting. I clocked out at 11:22. 22 minutes after my shift ended. I copied the conversation, saved it with clock in time and actual clock out time. Added a note, 22 minutes of uncompensated wait time due to mandatory approval policy. Then I went home, opened a new tab in my document, and created a second column. Time waiting for approval. Because if I was waiting for her approval before I could go home, that time wasn't mine. It was hers. It was the hospital's. An uncompensated work time has a very specific name under American labor law. It's called wage theft. Over the next 3 weeks, I documented every single minute, every message sent, every response received, every second between the end of my shift and Bryce's approval. Sometimes it was 4 minutes, sometimes 18. One Friday when she was in a conference, 37 minutes, 37 minutes standing at the nursing station. Clipboard turned in, patients handed off to the next shift. Coat over my arm, waiting for 2 words on a phone. I didn't complain once, didn't send a follow-up, didn't go knock on her office door. I just waited and documented. By the second week, my colleagues started noticing. Renata was the first one to ask, Sarah, are you keeping track of the time? I am, I said. She looked at me for about 3 seconds. Can I do the same? Within 2 weeks we were 4. Me, Renata, and 2 other colleagues from the afternoon shift, Gwen and Patrice. Each one with her own folder on her personal computer. Each one documenting her own wait times, her own approvals, her own shifts extended involuntarily by Bryce Langford's rule. We didn't arrange anything out loud inside the hospital, didn't message each other through the internal system. We met in the parking lot, or exchanged information by personal text on our own phones. We were nursing technicians. We knew how to work quietly under pressure. Bryce didn't notice a thing. At the end of October, I made an appointment with an employment attorney. Wasn't hard to find one. Louisville has lawyers who work wage theft cases on contingency. You only pay if you win. I booked online, paid $75 for the first consultation, and went alone on an afternoon off. Her name was Donna Mercer, 50s short hair, red-framed glasses, desk covered in folders. She asked me to explain the situation. I laid it out in 10 minutes. She didn't say anything for about 4 seconds. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad, and said, "Show me the memo." I took the copy out of the envelope and placed it on her desk. She read it again, looked up at me. "And you have every approval documented with a timestamp." "I do. 43 days of records." She put her pen down on the pad and said something I wasn't expecting. "Sarah, this isn't just wage theft. Depending on how the hospital logged hours over these 43 days, this could be a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act at the federal level. If other colleagues have similar documentation, we may be looking at a collective action." I felt my hand go very still in my lap. "How much are we talking?" Donna Mercer looked at my documents, then back at me. "Depends on how many people, how many hours, and over what period. But I can tell you this. The hospital is going to want to resolve this well before it reaches a federal judge." That night in the parking lot, I told Renata, Gwen, and Patrice what Donna Mercer had said. 5 seconds of silence. It was Patrice who spoke first. Patrice was 51, 3 grown kids, 15 years at Riverside. She was not someone who talked much. "Collective action means we all go in together." "It does, and the hospital's going to try to fire us." Donna said retaliation after a formal labor complaint is illegal under federal law. And if they try, it makes their situation dramatically worse. Patrice looked at the ground for a moment. Then she looked up. "I have 61 days of records. I started before you did." "I didn't know that. Why didn't you tell me?" She gave a small smile. "Because I didn't know where this was going. Now I do." The meeting with Riverside's HR happened on a November morning. Donna Mercer came with us. Me, Renata, Gwen, and Patrice sat on one side of the table. On the other side, the hospital's HR director, an in-house attorney I had never seen before, and Bryce Langford. Bryce walked into the room without making eye contact with me. Donna placed 4 folders on the table, one per employee, and said in a completely calm voice, "We have documentation covering 61 to 43 days of uncompensated hours resulting from the September 14th memo. The combined total is 19 hours and 32 minutes of unpaid work across the 4 employees present. We also have reason to believe other staff members may have a similar situation, which opens the possibility of a collective action under the Fair Labor Standards Act." The hospital's in-house attorney opened the folder, turned the first page, turned the second, closed the folder. He looked sideways at the HR director and said nothing. But I saw it. Everyone in that room saw it. Bryce Langford looked up for the first time since she'd walked in. Not at me, at the memo she had signed, now stapled to the front page of Donna's folder, with every single approval documented beneath it, minute by minute, day by day. For 2 months, the hospital settled in 18 days. No lawsuit, no federal judge, no headline in the Louisville Courier-Journal. The agreement included retroactive payment for all uncompensated hours across the 4 of us, plus a 50% premium on top of the regular rate, as required by the Fair Labor Standards Act for documented violations. Combined total for the 4 of us, $14,700. My share, $4,180. It's not a fortune, but it was never about the money. Bryce Langford's memo was formally revoked that same week. An internal notice went out across Riverside, stating that the prior approval policy for clocking out had been discontinued, as it was not aligned with existing operational protocols. Corporate language 4. We made a mistake and we do not want a federal judge to find out how big it was. Bryce Langford was transferred to another regional unit 3 weeks later. The hospital didn't confirm or deny whether it was voluntary. I didn't ask.
She gave me the rule. I used the rule, and in the end, it was her documents, signed by her hand, that paid my November bill. If you are sitting somewhere right now dealing with a policy that makes absolutely no sense, feeling like you have no options, you have options. Start documenting every single thing. What Sarah did was not revenge. It was precision. She didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't quit in a dramatic moment. She used exactly what her manager had created and turned every single minute of injustice into documented proof. Sometimes the most powerful thing you have is simply paying attention and writing it down. Coming up next, Jordan Ellis spent 9 years at a factory in San Antonio, Texas. He built, completely on his own time, on his own laptop, a system that predicted equipment failures before they happened. It saved the company millions. When they let him go, his manager said, "Leave everything on the desk." Jordan left everything that was theirs. The spreadsheet came home with him, and what happened to that factory over the next 6 months cost them a whole lot more than any raise ever would have.
The spreadsheet he left behind.
When they let me go, my manager told me to leave everything on the desk. The computer, the badge, the keys. I left all of it, everything that was theirs. The spreadsheet was mine. It always was. And it was the spreadsheet that brought the whole operation down.
My name is Jordan Ellis. I'm 43 years old, and I spent 9 of those years as a maintenance supervisor at an industrial components factory in San Antonio, Texas. It's not the kind of job that shows up on LinkedIn with a professional headshot and a blurred background. It's the kind of job where you show up at 5:45 in the morning before everyone else, because if a machine goes down at 6 a.m., you need to already be there. I love that. Always did. I was proud of knowing every single piece of equipment in that plant by its sound, literally by its sound. I could tell when the hydraulic press on line 3 was developing play in the piston before any sensor flagged it. I could tell when the central compressor was running 4% above normal because the filter needed changing. 9 years on a factory floor teaches you things that no software can replicate. The problem is, software doesn't ask for a raise, doesn't take vacation, and doesn't complain when a new manager walks in with ideas. The new manager's name was Preston Hale, 32 years old, MBA from Texas A&M, hired by the board to, quote, modernize the operational processes of the unit. Preston was the kind of person who used the word synergy without irony. He arrived in February with 3 priorities: digitize processes, reduce headcount, and implement an AI-based predictive maintenance system. I sat through his presentation in the conference room and said nothing, because I already had a predictive maintenance system. Mine just actually worked. Over 6 of my 9 years at the factory, I had built a spreadsheet. It wasn't pretty, no interactive dashboard, no animated graphs, just an Excel file with 11 tabs, color-coded, with manual data entry every single week. Every machine in the plant had a row. Every row had date of last maintenance, type of intervention, parts replaced, operating hours since last service, and, the most important column, my personal observation about that equipment's current behavior. Things no sensor recorded. Things I knew because I was there every morning before everyone else. Press L3, slight vibration on return cycle, monitor. Central compressor, consumption 4% above normal, filter in 2 weeks. Line 7 conveyor, intermittent noise in right bearing. Preventive replacement recommended in 30 days. 6 years of entries, week by week, never missed once. The spreadsheet lived on my personal laptop, bought with my money, in my house, on my network. I never transferred it to the company's system, not out of strategy, simply because their system didn't have fields for the kind of data I was recording, and because nobody ever asked. The conversation lasted 11 minutes. Preston Hale called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon at 4:30, an hour and a half before the end of my shift. The HR director was sitting in the corner. "Jordan, we've made the decision to restructure the maintenance team. Your position is being eliminated. Today is your last day." 11 minutes, 9 years, 1 cardboard box. I left my badge on the desk, left the plant keys, left the company tablet, and walked out with my box. The spreadsheet was at home, where it always had been. In the first week after the layoff, I did nothing. Didn't call anyone. Didn't update LinkedIn. Didn't send out a single resume. I woke up every day at 5:45 because my body didn't know how to do anything different. Made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the sun come up over San Antonio. My wife, Teresa, left me alone. She understood I needed time to process. 22 years together teaches you that kind of thing. On the 5th day, she put a cup of coffee in front of me, sat down next to me, and said, "You're going to be okay, but I need you to tell me one thing." "What?" "The spreadsheet. You still have it?" I looked at her. "I do." Teresa gave a small smile. "Then you have everything you need." 3 weeks after my termination, the hydraulic press on line 3 went down. Wasn't a surprise to me. In my last entry in the spreadsheet, made the Tuesday before my layoff, I had written, "Press L3, play and main piston confirmed, intervention needed within 15 to 20 days, risk of unplanned shutdown if unaddressed." 15 days after I left, total shutdown. Line 3 was offline for 4 days while they waited on the part from the supplier. 4 days of a downed line at an industrial components factory in San Antonio is not an inconvenience. It's a catastrophe. I found out because Renee, a technician who had worked alongside me for 6 years, texted me on my personal phone. "Jordan, L3 went down. Preston is in full panic mode. Did you know this was coming?" "I knew," I replied. "It's in the spreadsheet." She went quiet for a few minutes. What spreadsheet? Preston Hale spent the following weeks discovering what happens when you eliminate the operational memory of an industrial plant. The AI system he had brought in for $340,000 generated beautiful reports with colorful graphs. What it did not generate was the kind of knowledge that comes from being present every single morning for 6 years and listening to each machine. 4 weeks after press, the central compressor seized. Exactly as I had noted, consumption running 4% above normal for 3 consecutive weeks. Filter never changed. 6 weeks after, the bearing on the line 7 conveyor failed mid-shift. Exactly as I had documented, preventive replacement recommended 30 days before my termination. Each failure, an entry in my spreadsheet. Each entry with a date, a description, and a time window for preventive intervention. All ignored because nobody knew they existed. They cut the man and kept the software, Renee told me on a call. The software doesn't know anything. It just shows what the sensors pick up. And the sensors don't hear what you used to hear. In the second month after the layoff, I consulted an attorney. Not out of anger, out of professional curiosity, honestly. I wanted to know one simple thing. Was the spreadsheet mine? His name was Robert Castillo, specialized in intellectual property and employment law, charged $150 for the consultation, and gave me the answer in 20 minutes. You created this outside of work hours, on your personal equipment, without specific instruction or compensation from the company for that creation? Correct. And you never signed any intellectual property assignment agreement beyond the standard employment contract? I pulled out my original contract, kept in a folder since 2015, and placed it on his desk. He read for 3 minutes. Your contract covers work performed within the scope of your duties during work hours using company resources. This spreadsheet does not fall under any of those categories. He closed the contract and looked at me. Jordan, this is your intellectual property, 100%. I let that settle for a moment. And if the company wants access to it? Robert Castillo smiled for the first time since I'd walked in. Then the nature of this conversation changes completely. The phone call came on a Monday morning in June. It wasn't Preston Hale who called. Preston Hale had been removed from his position as operations manager 4 weeks earlier. A piece of information Renee had sent me by text with exactly 2 emojis and 0 words. It was the unit's director of operations, a man named Gerald Sims, who I had personally seen maybe 3 times in 9 years. Jordan, this is Gerald Sims. We need to talk. His voice was the kind of voice people use when they need something and don't want to appear like they need it. I recognized the tone immediately. About what, Gerald? 2 seconds of silence. About the operational situation at the unit and about the possibility of a collaboration. I looked at the ceiling of my kitchen for a moment. I'm listening. Gerald Sims spent 20 minutes explaining what I already knew. 3 critical failures in 6 weeks. The AI system Preston had contracted generating alerts that nobody knew how to interpret. The maintenance team, reduced from 6 to 4 people in Preston's restructuring, unable to anticipate failures without historical data. The board had run the numbers. The 3 unplanned shutdowns had cost the company approximately $2.1 million in lost production, emergency parts, and contract penalties with clients. 210 times the value of my severance package. When Gerald finished, I said only, I understand the situation. Let me think about it and I'll call you tomorrow. I called Robert Castillo before lunch. They're going to want access to the spreadsheet, Robert said. They are, I agreed. The question is what you want in return. I had already thought about this through the entire previous night. Teresa and I had talked until midnight on the back porch, with the San Antonio heat still hanging in the air, even after 11 p.m. It was never about destroying the company. It never was. It was about what's fair. I had built something of real value, something that took 6 years of presence, attention, and uncompensated work to create, something the company had discarded along with me, without realizing what they were throwing away. Now they knew what they had lost, and I wanted 3 things. First, I told Robert, rehire me as an independent contractor, not an employee, a consultant. 2-year contract, renewable, at $8,500 per month. Robert wrote it down without blinking. Second, formal credit as the creator and owner of the predictive maintenance methodology, documented in the contract, not verbal. Third, Renee gets promoted to maintenance supervisor before I sign anything. She has 6 years of experience on that floor and was passed over in Preston's restructuring for reasons I never understood. Robert stopped writing and looked at me. The third condition is about someone else? It is. He held my gaze for about 3 seconds, then went back to writing. The negotiation lasted 9 days. Gerald Sims accepted all 3 conditions without a counteroffer in the second meeting. It wasn't generosity, it was math. $8,500 a month over 2 years is $204,000, less than 10% of what the 3 unplanned shutdowns had cost in 6 weeks. Renee was promoted to maintenance supervisor that same week. When she called to thank me, I told her she had earned it on her own over the last 6 years. I had simply asked someone to pay attention. She was quiet for a moment. Why did you do that? The third condition? Why? Because it was fair, I said, and because you're going to be a better supervisor than I ever was. I walked back into that plant on the first Monday of July, not as an employee, as a consultant, my own boss, my own schedule, my own contract. The difference looked small from the outside. From the inside, it was everything. In the first 2 weeks, I transferred the spreadsheet into a format the team could use without me. With a weekly data entry protocol and an interpretation guide I wrote in plain language, no technical jargon, no corporate speak. I trained Renee and the other 3 technicians, not because it was a contractual obligation, it wasn't, because it was the right thing to do. Preston's $340,000 AI system was still installed. I didn't ask for it to be removed. I simply added my spreadsheet as a parallel monitoring layer, the sensors capturing what sensors capture, and the human knowledge capturing what sensors will never capture. In the 6 months that followed, 0 unplanned shutdowns. On an October afternoon, Teresa and I were sitting on the back porch when she asked me something. Do you miss being an employee? I thought about it for a moment. I miss the people, Renee, the technicians, the smell of the plant early in the morning. But not the job itself? No, because what I did best was never the job. It was what I built on my own mornings, on my own laptop, with my own attention. Teresa looked out at the yard for a moment. So they did you a favor? I let that sit. They did, I said. It just cost them $2.1 million to figure that out. Today, 18 months after the layoff, the contract with the factory has been renewed for 2 more years. I have 2 additional clients, mid-size industrial companies in Texas who heard about what happened and reached out through referrals. I did 0 marketing, paid $0 in advertising. Jordan Ellis Industrial Consulting bills $14,200 per month, more than double my salary as a supervisor. Preston Hale, as far as I know, is applying for management positions in other industries. His LinkedIn profile doesn't mention his time at the San Antonio plant. The $340,000 AI system is deactivated. The spreadsheet still runs.
When they let me go, Preston Hale thought he was cutting a cost. What he actually cut was the knowledge keeping that operation alive. I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just paid attention for 6 years and wrote down what I saw. Their mistake was assuming that knowledge belonged to the company. It always belonged to me. It came home with me the day they handed me that cardboard box, and it was waiting right there on my laptop when they finally figured out what they had thrown away. Jordan didn't get revenge. Jordan simply walked out the door with what was his. The lesson here isn't about getting even, it's about value. When you build real knowledge with real presence over real years, that knowledge doesn't disappear when someone hands you a cardboard box. It goes with you. And sooner or later, the people who let you go are going to need to knock on your door. And our final story tonight, Denise Harding worked for 12 years as a cashier at a neighborhood grocery store in Portland, Oregon. 12 years. Clean record, not a single complaint. Then, one Thursday afternoon, her new supervisor accused her of stealing, out loud, in the middle of the store in front of 18 people. Customers, colleagues, people she had known for years. The police were called. She was walked out the front door. Denise did absolutely nothing in response. Not one post, not one phone call, not one lawyer. She just lived her life. And 3 years later, that supervisor sent her an email asking her to be a reference. Stay with us.
They called the cops on the wrong woman.
She accused me of theft in front of 18 people, called the police, had me walked out the front door of a store where I had worked for 12 years, destroyed my reputation in a neighborhood where I had lived for 15. I did nothing in response. Absolutely nothing. And 3 years later, she emailed me asking me to be her reference. I want you to stay with me for this one, because the ending is something else.
My name is Denise Harding. I'm 47 years old. I've lived in Portland, Oregon for 16 years. And for 12 of those years, I worked as a cashier at Fairway Fresh, a neighborhood grocery store in Northeast Portland, 8 blocks from my house. It wasn't my dream job. I never pretended it was. It was an honest job in a neighborhood I loved, with customers I knew by name. Mrs. Kowalski, who came in every Tuesday with her handwritten list. Mr. Abebe, who bought the same yogurt every single week and always had something to say about the weather. The kids from the neighborhood school who stopped in for snacks on Friday afternoons after class. 12 years of familiar faces. 12 years without a single complaint, a single incident report, a single dollar missing from my register. I was proud of that. The new supervisor arrived in March. Her name was Carla Dutton, mid-40s. Transferred in from another location in the chain after the previous supervisor retired. Carla had the kind of energy that fills a room before she even walks in, and not in a good way. In her first week, she reorganized the schedules without telling anyone. In her second, she implemented a new end-of-shift register check policy, which wasn't a problem in itself, except that she ran those checks in a way that made it very clear she was looking for a culprit, not just balancing numbers. I noticed. Everybody noticed. But I had 12 years of clean record. I had no reason to worry. I was wrong. It was a Thursday afternoon in April. I was closing out my register, running through the end-of-shift routine I had done thousands of times, when Carla Dutton appeared at my side with an expression I had never seen on any supervisor in 12 years at that store. "Denise, I need you to come with me. Right now." There was something in her voice. Not urgency, certainty. The kind of certainty that belongs to someone who has already decided what's going to happen before checking any facts. Let me finish the close. Now. The cashier at the register next to mine, Jamie, 18 years old, 3 months on the job, looked at me with wide eyes. I put down the clipboard and followed Carla. Not to the back office, to the middle of the main floor. Carla Dutton stopped in the center aisle of Fairway Fresh, between the cereal shelves and the dairy section, where at that moment there were at least 18 people, customers, and staff combined, and said, in a voice loud enough for every single one of them to hear, We have a record of $120 missing from your register last week, and camera footage showing you handling the register outside of standard procedure. I'm going to need your badge. Right now. 18 people, the center aisle. Voice loud enough for every single one of them to hear. I felt the floor go out from under me. Not from guilt, from shock. Because I had done nothing. Absolutely nothing. Carla, this is not true. You need to show me. I've already called the police. They'll want to speak with you. Mr. Abebe was standing in the aisle holding his yogurt, looking at me. Mrs. Kowalski was standing there with her handwritten list, looking at me. Jamie was standing at her register with tears starting in her eyes, looking at me. And I stood there in the center aisle of the store where I had worked for 12 years, badge in my outstretched hand, feeling like the floor of Portland had disappeared completely. The officers arrived in 11 minutes, 2 of them, young, professional. They asked the standard questions without hostility, took notes, and asked me to wait outside while they spoke with Carla inside. I sat down on the metal bench on the sidewalk in front of Fairway Fresh. The red uniform I had worn for 12 years suddenly felt like the heaviest thing in the world. People walked by on the sidewalk. Some recognized me, neighborhood regulars, customers I had seen hundreds of times. Some looked away. Some held my gaze just a half-second too long, and a few gave me that look I knew immediately. Not certainty, but doubt. And in a small neighborhood, doubt is enough to do real damage. My daughter Kezia was 16. She walked past that store every single day on her way to school. That was the thought that almost broke me. Not the termination, not the humiliation. The idea of Kezia walking past Fairway Fresh the next morning and hearing something from someone. I breathed. I did not let the tears come. The police investigation lasted 3 weeks. It was not quick, and it was not comfortable. I had to go to the precinct twice to give a statement. Had to walk through my entire routine, my procedures, every detail of how I ran my register and closed my shifts. I brought everything I had. My timesheets going back 12 years, my register reconciliation records. 3 colleagues who volunteered, without me asking, to speak to my procedures and my character. The result came in a formal letter 3 weeks later. Insufficient evidence to support criminal charges. Case closed. But case closed by the police does not mean case closed in the neighborhood. In the weeks that followed, I learned what it means to have your reputation damaged in a small place. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, and because of that, more painful. Mr. Abebe kept buying his yogurt every week, but he stopped commenting on the weather when he passed me on the street. A neighbor I had known for 8 years started looking the other way when we crossed paths on the sidewalk. A mom from Kezia's school stopped me one afternoon and said, with the tone of someone who genuinely believed she was being kind, "Denise, I just want you to know, I'm sure it was probably nothing. These things happen." I'm sure it was probably nothing. I smiled, thanked her, kept walking. On the inside, I felt every single one of those words like a small burn. But I didn't post anything on social media. Didn't go speak to the regional manager of the chain. Didn't hire an attorney. Part of me wanted to, the loudest part. But there was a quieter part that was saying something different. Wait, watch, document. That week, I bought a notebook, not out of calculated strategy, at least not at first. More out of a need to process what had happened in a way that wasn't screaming or crying. I wrote everything down. The date, the time, the exact words Carla Dutton had said in the center aisle, the names of the people who had been present, the expression on Mr. Abebe's face with the yogurt in his hand, the sound of Carla's voice, loud enough for every single one of them to hear. Then I wrote down the result of the police investigation, the date of the letter, the case number. Then I wrote down my 12 years of clean record, the dates of my annual performance reviews, all positive, all kept at home because I always saved copies of everything. I didn't know what it would be for. I just knew it needed to exist somewhere outside of my memory. The notebook went into the kitchen table drawer, where it stayed for 3 years. In the 3 years that followed, I rebuilt. It wasn't fast, it wasn't linear, but it was real. 2 months after the termination, I got a position as a cashier at a larger store, a different regional chain, 20 minutes from home. I presented my references, 12 years of positive performance reviews at Fairway Fresh, 3 colleagues who wrote letters without hesitating, and was hired in the second interview. First year, promoted to senior cashier. Second year, shift supervisor. Third year, assistant store operations manager. It wasn't what I had planned for my life. But when you lose something unjustly and build it back with your own hands, what you build carries a different kind of weight. Kezia watched all of it. And one evening at the kitchen table after dinner, she said something I haven't forgotten. "Mom, were you angry?" "I was," I told her. "But you didn't do anything." "I did. I kept going." She looked at me for a moment, then went back to her homework without another word. But I saw that she understood. Carla Dutton left Fairway Fresh 18 months after she fired me. I found out through a former colleague, Jamie, who had grown up inside that store and was now a shift supervisor herself, that Carla had been transferred again, this time to a smaller location outside of Portland. Then, that she had resigned. Then, that she was looking for work. I filed that information away mentally and did nothing with it. It wasn't my business. It wasn't my responsibility. It wasn't my life. My life was going well. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, exactly 3 years and 2 days after that Thursday afternoon in the center aisle of Fairway Fresh. The address I didn't recognize at first, but the name in the sender field made me stop completely. Carla Dutton. I stared at the screen for about 10 seconds without moving the mouse. I opened it. It was a long email, longer than I expected. Carla explained she was applying for a supervisor position at a retail chain, she didn't say which one, and that the selection process included reference checks from previous employment. She had listed Fairway Fresh as recent experience. The HR department at the new company had contacted the Fairway Fresh chain for verification, and the chain's verification system had automatically flagged Carla's departure period with a note classifying her exit as a performance-related transfer, not a voluntary resignation. The new company had requested an additional reference from someone who had worked directly with Carla during her time in Portland. And Carla Dutton, for reasons I will never fully understand, had put my name down as that reference. I walked to the kitchen table, opened the drawer, took out the notebook, opened it to the first page. The date, the time. The exact words Carla Dutton had spoken in the center aisle of Fairway Fresh, in a voice loud enough for 18 people to hear. The names of the witnesses, the result of the police investigation, the case number. 12 years of clean record ended in 11 minutes in a grocery store aisle. I read it all again, slowly, like I was reading it for the first time. Then I closed the notebook, put it back in the drawer, and went to write my reply. I replied to Carla Dutton's email in 23 minutes. Not because I needed time to think. I needed time to choose every single word carefully. I did not lie. I did not exaggerate. I did not use emotional language. I wrote exactly what had happened, in chronological order, with dates, with the police case number, with the names of the witnesses present in the center aisle that Thursday afternoon in April, 3 years earlier. I wrote that the investigation had concluded there was no evidence of any wrongdoing on my part. I wrote that I was terminated publicly, without any internal process, without any opportunity to respond, in front of customers and colleagues. I wrote that my reputation in a neighborhood where I had lived for 15 years had been affected by statements that the police investigation itself did not sustain. I did not say Carla was a bad person. I did not say she deserved to lose the job. I simply said what had happened, with dates, with facts, with the case number. I sent it to the HR department of the new company in copy, because Carla's original email had included their contact information for verification purposes. I clicked send, closed the laptop, made coffee. 3 days later, Jamie texted me. "Denise, did you hear Carla didn't get the job?" I knew. The HR department at the new company had thanked me for my detailed response and had closed Carla's application 2 days after my email. "I heard," I replied. "How do you feel?" I looked at that question for about 2 minutes before answering. The honest answer was complicated. There was no satisfaction of the kind I had imagined in those first months after the termination. That hot, immediate fantasy of watching Carla fall the exact same way I had fallen. What there was instead was something quieter, something cleaner. The feeling that the truth had arrived where it needed to arrive, at the right moment, without me having to push anything. "I feel good," I replied to Jamie. "I feel really good." That morning in the kitchen, Kezia was having breakfast before school. She looked at me and said, "Something happened. You seem different today." "Nothing," I said. "Everything's fine." She studied me for a second longer than usual. "Mom, was it that thing from the grocery store?" I smiled. "It was." "And?" "And it's over. The right way." Kezia looked at me for one more moment, then went back to her breakfast without saying another word. But she was smiling. "Today, I am assistant operations manager at a chain with 11 locations across Oregon and Washington. I never went back to Fairway Fresh. I didn't need to. I ran into Mr. Abebe by chance at a farmer's market on a Saturday morning, about 2 years after everything happened. He recognized me immediately, came straight over with a big smile and said, 'Denise, I heard what happened to you back then. It was an injustice.' I thanked him. 'How is the family?' he asked. 'Good,' I said. 'Really good.' And it was true. Carla Dutton, as far as I know, is still looking for work in retail management. I'm not certain. I don't follow it. My life is too full for that."
She destroyed me in a grocery store aisle in front of 18 people. And 3 years later, she sent me an email asking me to be her reference. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't scheme. I didn't wait with anger burning in my chest for 3 years. I just lived my life, built something real, kept going, kept showing up. And when the moment came, I had exactly what I needed. The truth. Documented, cold, complete. The truth did the rest. It always does. 3 stories today. 3 people who were treated like they were disposable. At work, in their neighborhood, in the place where they had built something real over years. And 3 people who responded exactly the same way. No violence, no drama, no public meltdown. Sarah used their own rule against them. Jordan walked out with what was his and waited. Denise did nothing but live well and told the truth when she was asked. What do all 3 have in common? Not one of them asked for permission to be respected. They simply acted like they already deserved it. Because they did. If you are going through something like this right now, at work, at home, in a place where you have given years of loyalty and are being treated like you don't matter, write it down. Do your work with excellence and wait. The truth has a very particular way of arriving exactly where it needs to. It always gets there. Next time, a sommelier publicly humiliated by a wealthy customer at a fine dining restaurant in Seattle. The customer believed that money could buy anything, including the right to destroy another person's reputation in front of a full dining room. What he didn't know was that the sommelier he humiliated that night was quietly, methodically buying the most coveted vineyard in the state. Don't miss it.